Okay, welcome everyone today to our first virtual artist conversation to accompany our exhibition Branching Out, which examines contemporary casting across the country and really considers how casting, the knowledge itself of casting, creates a family tree of artists and teachers, students who grow in their knowledge and create pathways of relationships that resemble branches of a family tree. I'm so excited to start this series off with the artists that are here today. Alison Ouellette-Kirby and Noah Kirby have been big participants at the Metal Museum for, I won't say how long, but we'll just say a while. And I'll
Decade.
let you go into details if you'd like. Um, we have known you for many years, and I'm just so proud to have this opportunity to work with you here today. Um, so I'll, I have a little introduction that I'd like to make, and I'll be sharing details in the chat for those of you who are following along. Artists Alison Ouellette-Kirby and Noah Kirby are here today to kick off our virtual artist conversations with a discussion about their own artistic practices, collaborating with distinct perspectives, and the state of contemporary casting. Longtime supporters of the Metal Museum, Noah Kirby was the 2018 Fire Conference keynote speaker, and Alison Ouellette-Kirby was the 2023 conference keynote speaker. Both serve on the board of the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance and co-direct 6 Mile Sculpture Works in Granite City, Illinois. Thanks everyone for joining us today and to participate in this conversation. It's not just a presentation, but a conversation. There'll definitely be time for questions at the end. I will go ahead and share a few details about Alison and Noah in the chat if you'd like to connect with them on Instagram. I'll share their Instagram handles here, websites for 6 Mile Sculpture Works and the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance. And of course, you can catch them both on the podcast Iron. Their interviews with Laura Mullen Vermillier are available on that website. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the Wingate Foundation and the Hyde Family Foundation for our ongoing exhibition and programming support, the Tennessee Arts Commission and Arts Memphis, of course, for our operating support. And beyond these huge sponsors and sources of incredible support, we want to thank our members and donors, which continue to grow in our community and our opportunities to offer programming like this. If you are interested in becoming a member or renewing your membership, please follow this link that I will paste in the chat. So, Noah and Alison and I had talked about opening up this conversation with an open-ended question. So I'll use this to begin. Alison and Noah, how did you first become involved at the Metal Museum?
Do you want to go first?
I think Allison should go first. Allison's probably been involved with the museum a little longer than me, so
Well, I don't know if I would call my first experience so much involvement, but it's what drew me in. I was in graduate school at the University of Tennessee, and my friend Monica Tomachek was in the very first cooker show, and as artists often do, she was finishing it at the last minute and so tired that she couldn't drive it to Memphis without falling asleep at the wheel. So I drove her and her piece there. And that was my first time at the museum, and it just such a wonderful eye-opening experience that a place like this even existed, and everyone at the museum was so welcoming, and I got to stay overnight at the museum, and I was just blown away. And after that, I visited it a lot.
yeah, it was. I mean, it's if you've never been there, it's on a big bluff at a bend in the Mississippi River, and you've seen images from that location in films all over the place. But you're sitting on the top of a bluff. You look out on the river. You get to watch the barges. You're in these old buildings that are is a military hospital. So it's got a real character to it. There's a mound right next to it and stuff. So it's just a gorgeous place. And it's like the first the road you get to, the first place you get to when you cross the river on 55. I mean, the first exit in Tennessee is Metals Museum Drive. You know, I came to it when I was in grad school. My former professor, Alice and I shared a professor, Dennis Peacock. See, we started sharing early. We shared professors, we shared classes. Allison was my instructor when she was in grad school. So that's scandalous, I'm sure. But I was in grad school, and my instructor Dennis was in a show at the Metal Museum, and he called me up and asked me to come down to help him take his piece down and take it back to Tennessee to Knoxville, where I was from. So I drove down, and I'd known and heard about the Metals Museum from Allison and from two really long time supporters of the museum who are friends as well, Leanne Mitchell and Jim Bonacorsi. And Leanne actually put together the first pig iron art cookers show that you see in that image.
Richard Dennis.
Leanne and Richard Dennis, yeah. So I came down and helped Dennis, and it was the same thing Allison was talking about. It's such a welcoming place. There's just so much incredible stuff to see there. The quality of the work that's there, and the quality of the craftspeople that are there, and the technicians that are there, and all the staff. I mean, it's a beautiful place. And so, and the smell of it, you got to love the smell of coal and coke burning and barbecue. That's like all goes together nicely. So at that point, I was like, I'm in love. I went back and I decided I was going to, do a little blacksmithing and incorporate that into my sculpture practice. And it really changed a lot of ways the trajectory of my work and my experience in grad school. What else do we need to say about the Metals Museum? We can't say enough.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, one thing that was interesting to me when we were talking about, preparing for this virtual talk today, the conversation is that you both, as you became more and more involved at the Metal Museum through the Art Cookers series of exhibitions that are really like interactive and they end with a shared meal, you not only created a piece together, but then eventually you co-curated the last two of this iteration of an exhibition and an event. So maybe you'd want to talk about that sort of collaboration as well.
Absolutely. And that's, now that you bring that up, I mean, this is the first real collaboration that we did.
It
was because of the Metal Museum and the Art Cooker show you see there. So that image is a turkey cannon smoker that we made for the cooker show. It's because it's kind of a military place, and I like that, the idea of that kind of stuff, and I'm interested in it. And
that's what we were jumping off of for the theme of our piece.
Yeah. So that's kind of like a mortar, like a Civil War kind of mortar at this beautifully sort of defendable space that the Metals Museum is. And we could smoke, what was it, a 20-pound turkey in it.
In the barrel of the mortar.
Yeah, and then we could launch it 14 feet when it was done.
14 whole feet.
Yeah. So we made the smoker, and we had the big event down there.
Actually, if you want to go back for just 1 minute. So just a couple things so everybody knows. In the second image, you can see some food flying out of it. We didn't use any like gunpowder or anything. There's a giant spring in it, which is why it only flies about 14 feet. Because we wanted to make sure it was edible. And one of the really fun things too was at the reception, people were actually laying down money on the ground to bet on how far the turkey would fly.
Right.
And we had a giant target also on the ground.
It was like a big platter that was a target.
Yeah.
Painted like a target.
And it made it to the target. But
I think Wally actually started that, the former director of the museum, founding director.
He might have.
Started, putting down money, betting on where the turkey was going to land. He lost the bet because I think it went further than he thought. It was pretty funny too, because it's kind of like a pop gun. Those guns at Cracker Barrel you could get that had the little cork in them, and you pull the string and pop it. So the cannon had the spring in it and like a sabot or a cradle to carry the bird. And what you don't see in that image is like the little string with the cork on the end of it that sort of sticks out the end whenever it launches.
Yeah, it comes right out and then kind of falls.
It's kind of silly.
It was fun.
The beautiful thing, that show is really great too, because there was and this is like what happens at the Metal Museum. Like you show up and you kind of don't know what you're going to get or what you're going to, it's going to be good, there's going to be something interesting, and then all this amazing stuff starts happening. So we were in this show, we were excited about it. Another artist we knew, Kenny Marshall, showed up, and we hadn't been talking to each other at all. But he shows up with a trailer behind his car that's got this cover on it, and he backs right up to where our smoker was sitting, sort of directly opposite us, and gets out and hits a button, and this trailer stands up, and this curtain falls off, and it's a Scud missile launcher, like a garage, Scud missile launcher shish kebab cooker.
Yeah, he cooked little shish kebabs in
it. Yeah, so it was hilarious, So you got this sort of silliness happening, and everybody's gathered for a meal and sitting around. It's such a familial, warm and welcoming place, and every exhibition's like that. Laura, you can go. I guess one of the other. So that led to us.
Well, the concept of the cooker show originally was that some of the artists in the first show then passed the show off to some other people to curate it the next time. And so that kind of wasn't really happening officially. So we approached the museum about bringing it back and us curating it.
Yeah.
So that's what happened in 2008. So we didn't have work in the show in 2008 because we were the curators. And we had to, differentiate it from every other show. So we titled this one Meet Metal.
Speaking of the kind of the idea of branching out, maybe is, this is this sort of family connection, or the ties that bind, is this sort of theme of this series, I think, and something that's true for any of us that do work that is really sort of labor intensive and physically demanding and technically very demanding. And, most of us can't, like I can't do all of my castings by myself, or it's not efficient to do that. So you bring other people into the fold, and you get a big crew together, and you make these things happen. So it's kind of like you get a whole bunch of cooks and bring them into the kitchen, right? And then you make this big, buffet of things that is a collection of artwork, and we all get to walk away with sort of our individual pieces. So this, as well as having helped somebody else make their piece. And so the cooker show was very much like that. You would invite other people in. Everybody had to share a recipe, and it had to be cookable. Like it was legit.
Yeah, the catalog had pictures of the pieces and recipes, as you can see there, for Remy Hanneman's gumbola.
Yeah, a gumbola, it was fantastic. And James Visti's pencil sharpener was just tasty. That's hilarious.
Yeah, this is from the second cooker show that we curated, Tasty.
So you see that like the quality of the work was really good, and everybody's on the campus, cooking out and grilling and having a generally a good time. And it's not stuffy or pretentious in any way, but still very, very, like exceptional work. And that's another characteristic that I think is true about the museum, and probably most of the people in the going to be in the branching out series, it's not pretentious. It's very approachable. Everybody's a very approachable person. They're approachable people. The artworks are approachable, and yet still very sophisticated, very technically demanding, very sort of conceptually and ideologically rigorous.
And I also, when we curated these two shows, we tried to think really carefully about what kind of art the Metal Museum represented. So we were very careful to try to choose people who were sort of more sculptors, as well as people who were more sort of blacksmiths,
as well as casters.
Well, that's sculptors too, but yeah. So we tried to, because we wanted to have the show have a lot of variation, but we also wanted to integrate everything that the Metal Museum was really showcasing at the time.
And forever, I mean, the Metals Museum is the only place in this country that is dedicated to artwork and craft work that is made using fine metals and metalworking techniques, from blacksmithing and casting and jewelry techniques. And all of us that are in this sort of orbit, we tend to sort of mix and match all of those different, very technically demanding things together. And it's really wonderful to have a place, like the Metals Museum, that's kind of our place. It's a museum dedicated to us. It's, I would put it's like our Victoria and Albert Museum in a way. Certainly it's coming closer to that now.
Like the American Victoria and Albert, yeah.
Not
yours. I'll take the compliment. Thanks.
Well, it's true
Well,
because I've seen Albert Paley's work at the Victoria Albert, and I've seen Albert Paley's work at the Metal Museum.
yeah,
And
yeah,
especially with the big expansion that's coming.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, on that note of kind of fine and ferrous metals, and mixing different processes that I have been discovering really happens a lot with the artists that we exhibit and work with at the Metal Museum. You both mentioned to me that you work not only with metal, but also with other materials. And when I was asking you to kind of talk me through your own history, your shared history of collaboration, you both were really, really excited about tone deaf. And even, when we were talking before this started, you were like, yeah, 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 that's like a great kind of launching off point for our collaboration. So I thought maybe we could start with that
Okay.
installation from 2010, just, because it seems to touch on a lot of points that you're already talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were also saying with Laura earlier, there's actually sort of a 10-year lag between us making collaborative work. We started at the Metals Museum with our art cooker, and then the University of Mississippi invited us to do an exhibition. And we were really trying to decide whether or not, since we were both invited, do we do Noah's show and my show just both in the same space, or do we build some collaborative work? And we decided to build some collaborative work, and we've been building collaborative work ever since, as well as doing our own work. But this piece in this image, that image is called, it's Tone Deaf is the name of the show, but this piece is called, suddenly I can't remember.
I can't either.
It's called Dialogue.
There you go.
Yes. And so when we were trying to figure out what to build for this collaborative show, actually, it was really, really difficult for us to figure out what to build. And there were also discussions that ensued, and discussions can sometimes turn into arguments. And what we realized is that sometimes Noah and I will be arguing for, say, a half hour, and then realize that we're actually arguing the same side of the argument. We're just using different language. And maybe that's because we're from two different regions or something. But so this piece, Dialogue, has these two horns, and each side is speaking numbers at each other. Do you want to?
No, I was just thinking it's not just numbers, it's coded communication.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there's these when you're encoding a communication, like you want to keep a secret, like spies. They use these things called spy numbers. It's called a 3-key pass. So like if you ever had your little Orphan Annie decoder ring, kind of thing, that's based off of this idea of a 3-key pass. So there you have to have like certain numbers, or a book code. You have to have certain numbers in order to sort of decode it. So we sort of stumbled into this discovery of this idea of these like encoded communications, and we use that, like, so it's like 1 1 alpha echo 1 3, stuff like that. It's just numbers. It's kind of random, and they're usually in like this like weird digital female voice, and they still use them today. Like you can go and you can listen to,
You can
like,
Google spy numbers.
yeah, you can Google spy numbers and listen to like encoded communications.
But originally we tried to write a script where, there were lines like, I didn't sleep at all last night, and the other
I was up all night, or
but we realized people would probably fixate or concentrate on the content of those words.
the story,
So
right?
we felt like the numbers would be more clear about the two different voices saying the same thing at each other.
Yeah. Or speaking the same language, but saying, yeah. So it was like, we didn't want the content of, like Alison was saying, of our conversation to be important. We wanted the structure of the conversation. That was what was important to us. And that really informed everything about this sort of tone deaf show.
All the rest of the exhibition came from that idea.
Right. And so there would be like the piece we're looking at here had 2 different horns with 2 different singular tracks on it. And if you walk around the piece at any given moment, one voice might outweigh the other, or one dialogue or might outweigh the other. But if you were to stick your head in the middle of it, which you can do, you can hear both sort of discourses simultaneously, and our brains can't process that. So this idea of creating this sort of physiological response was something that we really keep through this conversation, was something that we keyed off for this artwork. And then that's made of a sort of a combination of found objects and
It's okay.
fabricated objects.
You can see it in the background. You can go on to the
Yeah.
next image.
And all of these things, you know, we have to apologize. We don't have the audio running, but they all have like embedded digital audio devices in them, which was another thing that probably Alison brought that to the table for us more than me. She, in some of her individual work, she sort of mixed and matched some audio tracks and recordings and things. So we wanted to have sort of a way to have the audio going and not see all the wires and the computers and everything. So we spent a lot of time like hiding and embedding digital devices inside of these things that we built.
Yeah, and this image, the image on the right is a piece called Monologue, and that's actually it's seen from
the back.
The back. Yeah. The front is facing the wall so that the sound coming off of it bounces off the wall and hopefully disorients you a little bit. But it's got 6 towers, each with 4 horns, and each horn has a number of different soundtracks and voices. I shouldn't say soundtracks, it's all
They're
voices. All yeah. So the piece is called Monologue. But each horn might have 5 different ones coming out, and they're all talking at the same time. So
you'd have like, you know, Paul Pot, you know, and R2D2 and you know, who else do we have in there?
All kind, Ricky Ricardo. There was all
Bart
kinds
Simpson.
of like political talk,
Jim
pop
Jones.
Culture, you know, other figures from history that may or may not have been pleasant voices.
Hitler.
Yeah. And I also spent a lot of time editing out laughter, music, you know, other things so that it was just voices that you heard. And what we really were hoping is that people might, after seeing this piece, possibly consider who they're listening to, who they're giving the voice to.
Well, and the sort of physical presence that sort of the word has, the thing that's interesting about this, because the way we installed it's sort of a sort of curve, and it's pushed into the corner. So not only are you getting the monologues and the audio, you're also getting echoes of the audio bouncing off the wall. So when you walk through that space, we've created like a corridor that you walk through. You're getting the information from one side, and then it's bouncing, and you're getting a slight delay, and you're getting it again from the other side. So there's just this very disconcerting cacophony, and it's really hard to, I mean, people were kind of like losing their balance on the inside, which I think is a great compliment. I'm like, oh, right. It like had a physical effect.
Yeah.
You know, but it's very disconcerting.
That visceral reaction was very important to us.
You know, and to speak of like, you know, we're talking from the Metals Museum, one of the things that's probably a constant with us is some connection to metal or metal work, as in this case, it's part of the infrastructure, the sort of frames that support everything. And then we, you know, vacuum formed the plastic panels, and we built, you know, metal dies and things like that to help support, to do the vacuum forming. And it's really important to us that we sort of touch everything, or can touch everything, and understand how all of these things are built and assembled. That's one of the things you see, you know, I noticed at the Metals Museum, you walk in and like the craft and the level of execution that's happening there, you know, it really got me to up my game. So, you know, every fastener matters, every rivet matters, every weld matters, every connection is part of the overall piece, you know, and so that's something that's really, really sort of stuck with us. Do you want to talk about the big horn, or the other piece on the left is a big megaphone that's all built. I mean, it's all assembled. It comes apart in like a flat pack. It was a pain in the butt to build. And I think it's a 10-foot diameter circle that's 16-foot long, and it has an audio track on the inside of it that whispers. So it's just sort of mumbly whispering.
A giant megaphone that's just whispering.
Yeah. It's just,
but
that kind of stuff.
The similar thing about that one is when you stand at the front of the megaphone and you are maybe straining to try to make out the words, again, you sort of lose your balance. So it's got that same kind of disconcerting or visceral sort of.
Well, and it creates a forced perspective because it's a cone that's laying on its side. When you're standing at the edge of it, you have to kind of like lean in to line up with the perspective, and then you sort of lose your balance into it. Um, I guess we were kind of cavalier with that in a way. I mean, I'm lucky that nobody got, hurt, I mean, it looks like such a sort of mundane or innocuous kind of object, and all of these objects are kind of innocuous in a way. Um, but they can definitely sort of throw you off balance, which is something that was very important for us for the tone deaf. Going back to this idea of the conversation where you're kind of speaking the same thing, but in different ways, and how disconcerting that can be. She's Canadian. So
You just outed me.
I did, and I'm from East Tennessee. So I use the English language in a very different way than she uses the English language. Her parents were English teachers, and she's very, very proper and very formal. And, if you know anybody from Tennessee, you know that the English language is a completely pliable, mutable thing that you can change at will. And you speak with a lot of implication. So that's where a lot of this sort of comes from, is just sort of how we use language and how we communicate. But one of the things that we found is like how we use the language of materials and work together. There's no confusion there. That's like, we have different levels of technical dexterity, but that's like a constant language for us in a way that is shared, which I think is pretty kind of interesting. What else we got there?
Might as well
Well,
move on to the
oh,
next, unless you have a question or something.
yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm at a point of privilege because I'm asking a question in the middle, but I am curious, like this, it's also an artist conversation that we're in right now, but the idea that collaboration can map so smoothly onto artistic collaboration is really interesting to hear. And I wondered if conversation, like how that was at play with Arena, and then this example from a similar period. So again, like 10 years after Tone Deaf, if you could maybe talk about these two pieces.
Absolutely.
Sure. So Arena is five?
There's five.
Five large cones that are all facing in at each other. So you can see there's some similarities already with Tone Deaf, but Arena was really born out of something that we each had always wanted to do in different ways. So Noah always wanted to do a piece where he would speak something into existence. And I think this is kind of that. And I always wanted to do a piece that would translate gibberish in real time, translate your voice in real time into gibberish. And that's kind of what Arena does. So when you walk up to the back end of one of those horns and speak in, there is a computer system in the piece that takes your voice and jumbles it up. And so it comes out the wide end of the speaker sounding very different than what you said into it.
In real time. So it chops up the language, it flips words backwards, and it misorganizes and misarranges them. So it's like you might walk up and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And it goes, "Why like that?" And I think that's the sort of speaking into existence something is kind of an interesting idea. And that actually for me started at the Metals Museum, watching like people use power hammers, and they're just so boom, 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 boom. They got this great rhythm to them, and this wonderful sort of sound and song of them. And I wanted to take something where I could sort of take a conversation, just say, "Hey, my name is Noah," right? But have it translated into like thumps and strokes on a hammer. And so that's one of the things I was thinking about whenever we were thinking about like how do we chop this language up and what it means. And then Alice and I sort of come together on the notion of the gibberish generator. And the physical presence of it all, I think, is something that's important to us. Like Al and I, both of us tend to operate on a real wide range of scales that we work at. Allison probably goes a little smaller than I do at times.
Early in my career, I had a philosophy that I never made anything I couldn't carry on the bus. And that's just because I had a lack of resources for larger work. But as the years passed and we had more money and we had larger vehicles and we had trailers and bigger equipment and, A-frames and jib cranes, and some of the work got bigger.
And I grew up in and around, commercial construction my whole life. So, working at architectural scale is sort of more comfortable for me. But the point being there is that for both of us, the idea of scale is important to make something that is experiential, something that's sort of visceral, something that is, on scale with the lived in world, as opposed to something that is more sort of containable within the sort of possessed world of, the rarefied artifact. I mean, you can buy this. Would be happy to sell you a 16-foot long, 8-foot diameter megaphone, but it's a rare occasion that somebody wants to buy something like that.
Sure.
And to speak to Laura, you can go to the next slide too. You go. That was true for the this un chien regarde bien l'élevage. I can't say it.
Chien regarde bien l'élevage.
Right there you go. She said it right. The other piece was outside, and so making something that's sort of appropriate for that space at a scale. And this was inside the museum, and
at the Metal Museum.
And this big disc, this big sort of,
which almost touched the ceiling.
Yeah. So the engineering to figure out how to get that in and break it down is something that's kind of fun. But it's also like, how do we create a sense of presence with the things that we do? And what's the sort of minimal amount of information that we can use to create like the maximum amount of presence? I think sort of empty space and silence is something that is important for us as well when we're thinking about like, how do we compose with these works. So this dog that we both sculpted it, which is another fun thing to, you talk about that.
Well, I was just going to say, if you try to actually sculpt something together with someone else, and it's, well, we weren't always on it at the same time, but it's really odd because it's not like we split the dog up and said, you do the head and I'll do the tail or anything. We both worked on the whole thing, but one of us would work on it for a little while and then go to the other and say, I'm having a little trouble with just this spot right here. So then the other one would step in and work on it for a little while until we had modeled a piece that we were happy with.
Or would come in and completely change something that you didn't want to touch that you were really proud of,
Yeah, there was a little back and forth.
But that was an interesting process because it's like, well, we're communicating with one another sort of through this material and through this process, as opposed to sort of using our words. And that was really fun.
And this piece is, the title is French. It comes from a French proverb that means a dog looks at a bishop. And it's similar to some of the work in Tone Deaf, and especially that idea that there's two different voices, because that proverb means two things. It means, it's something my father used to say to myself and my brothers as a child. My father was French, and he would say that, and basically what it meant was, you're getting a little too big for your britches. So
like, mind your place, know your place.
Yeah. You're basically saying you're putting yourself in the position of the dog looking up at this bishop, but it has the dual meaning that also even the lowly dog has the right to look at the bishop. So, so I see it as related to what we were thinking about with Tone Deaf. And from there, we started to try to find other proverbs or sayings or things that would go the same way.
Idioms. We were really using idioms. I mean, in the Tone Deaf show, we kind of thought loosely about like theatrical terms and language, like monologue and dialogue and orator, these kind of things, prompts and, exit stage left kind of stuff. And so for the Shin show, it was, well, what sort of idioms did we grow up with and use? And, Alison was talking about what her dad said, and where I'm from, you would say, like, don't rise above your raisin or something like that, a little turn of phrase. So that show really like spun around all of those ideas. One of the pieces was called Not My Circus, Not My Monkeys. It's like, this isn't my problem, this is your problem.
But Tone Deaf had the idea of, your voice and whose voice are you listening to, and the Chien body of work had the idea of finding your place
and questioning that, like that authority, whatever that authority is, be it a big sort of like sparkly disc, you know, what you can't see in that image there is that's like reflective highway sign stuff. So when you actually experience the piece, it just sort of sparkles and glitters and bedazzles your eyes. It's kind of hard to focus on. So it has like a lot of presence and a lot of authority. So here's this sort of like stoic dog, just sort of like questioning or challenging, or at least holding their position relative to this icon.
Well, and its head is just slightly turned to, the side. You know how dogs kind of do that when they seem puzzled. So it was kind of that idea. You can go to the next one.
Yeah, and this one was middle of a murder. So which is not an idiom that I think that I'd heard or anything, but we had a lot of good time kind of like inventing our own little idioms and phrases that have become part of like our language. So this middle of a murder it's a bunch of crows.
Cast aluminum crows.
Yeah, that are all cast aluminum and they're on a frame, and you come up and you sort of turn the crank and the birds fly around and they cast shadows all around you that sort of like magnifies exponentially the sort of like you're in a flock of a murder of crows.
But it's also this idea that it's you that's creating the flight around you, them circling you by operating the crank.
And that was something that for this show really kind of came into being, is that, um, we are all complicit in creating the scenarios that we're in to some degree, or how we react to them is important, but for this one, you walk up and you sort of turn the crank and you're making your own sort of flock of murderous crows that you're standing in like you're creating your own chaos, I guess. This one was kind of, I have to apologize to the Metal Museum. Well, we don't apologize, but because we like this, but like being the kind of antagonist that we are, this piece, like we intentionally made all the gears really dry and everything not fit really well.
So they squeaked.
Yeah, it's like, it's just like, Alfred Hitchcock kind of the birds noise. And I know
it made people in the office up there.
I know, because the office used to be upstairs. I feel a little bad for that slight antagonism, but it's something we're very keen on, that it's like the noise of the thing.
Well, I haven't even heard stories about how it sounded, so I think you're okay. I haven't heard about it. Yeah.
Enough time's gone by that we've
Yeah.
ourselves.
We haven't, the story has not continued here. But I will say, so we're at about 15 minutes till, and I haven't seen any questions in the chat, but I'll give people a chance to ask them now if you'd like to throw in a question. One question that we had talked about, or kind of an open-ended topic, Alison and Noah, was the idea of artistic genius and talent, and the juxtaposition of those like humongous ideas that we put on a pedestal, and then the realities of like the hard work and the community that goes into each piece. And so I thought maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
You're hitting on a pet peeve of mine for sure.
And mine, actually. Yeah. Neither of us like that idea of people saying, "Oh, you're so talented." And, thank you for the compliment, but I worked really hard on that.
Right.
And I worked for years to try to get my skill to this level.
And lots of people that, like you see in that image, lots of people have been around us, helping us gain those skills and helping us sort of cultivate this expertise. The picture on the left is me pouring metal at Sloss furnaces for another piece that is in the slideshow that we might or might not see. But I couldn't have done this. This is something that's unique about our community. There you go, bringing in the sheaves at Webster University. I couldn't have cast that cast iron hay bale without Sloss furnaces and without the people at Sloss furnaces. We couldn't have, put on the cooker show without the Metals Museum and the support of the people at the Metals Museum who helped us elevate our skills. Allison's pouring with a good friend of ours right there, Toby Flores. She invented this process of casting iron in a centrifuge. I think it's pretty cool.
It's not so much, it's the mold process.
Yeah.
The casting is just like any other centrifugal casting.
Yeah, but see, there's this sort of like expertise, this really sort of deep reservoir of expertise that we try to surround ourselves with and we can pull from. And she, came up with this way of casting iron that, hadn't been done, and now she teaches this as a workshop all over the country. Maybe like if you want to learn, Laura, want to like run through some other ones. I don't know, unless you have a question or something. But
Well, sure. I'll
you have to surround yourself with sort of people with expertise, and you cultivate those skills, and
and that community.
yeah, and that's what looks like, genius. Not that I'm saying that we're a genius or we look like geniuses. It isn't for us. It's not like some sort of given, bestowed upon, you're born with it. It's inherent. You might have the inherent desire to improve yourself or the work, but you have to be willing to put the work in to sort of learn how to do the stuff, which looks easier whenever you're, good at it and you've cultivated, put in your 10,000 hours or whatever. So yeah, I don't buy into creative genius. I buy into hard work, which is another thing that's true about like the work that happens at the Metals Museum and in these kinds of environments. It's dirty, it's grimy. Everything about it looks like it is sort of unintelligent, right? It's very manual.
I wouldn't say that.
Well, I mean, it looks like menial, it looks like manual labor, right? It is manual labor, but that doesn't preclude intelligence.
That doesn't mean there's no intelligence
Right.
behind it.
We tend to see things in those ways, whenever we talk about genius, it's like, oh, they just have the skill they were born with. No, anybody who's skilled has worked.
Mm, well put. Um, I will kind of bounce between pieces by each of you since we only talked about really collaborative pieces, but you also both have really robust independent careers as artists separately. So I'll just kind of bounce between the two of those if there are any that you'd like to talk about.
Um,
That's
well,
Allison's piece.
yes, that's my piece. It's
Okay.
titled Tumbleweed, and two different images, one obviously before it's rusted and one after. I was lucky enough to show it in an exhibition where they didn't mind that it was going to rust over time. So in Perryville, Missouri, it got installed as bare steel and deinstalled as rusted steel.
It looks beautiful with a nice rust patina on it. Allison, I think, is, being kind of a foreigner, but not really a foreigner, Canada, come on, it's not that different. Uh, um, but she still is like, she still sees like there are things that are just a little bit different. And so this idea of sort of being an alien or a stranger in a strange place and what does it mean to have a home, I think is something that's always present in her work. Yeah, there you go. And like, the gun houses are really beautiful castings.
Also, because I'm from Canada, where the gun laws are very different, I do have strong feelings about the amount of weaponry and gun shooting or gun deaths in the United States. But I also appreciate guns as a beautiful piece of engineering. So there's a lot of complicated discourse that can happen. And this piece right here is titled Instead. And what I really want that piece to be is a piece that people will contemplate some of these issues. So it's kind of made like a bomb and kind of made like a T-ball. The house, which is a commercial house because it's a monopoly house, is on the inside and surrounded by this earth, two halves of a whole that's surrounded by weapons. So I really wanted it to be a point of discussion for people.
It's funny, the previous piece was called Our Neighbor's House and of hers. And, our neighbor across the street, like I go over there and I shoot guns with him, and have a good time doing it, and I grew up with, guns as part of sort of the American culture. So it's just an interesting discourse to have, and it's not this sort of singular, simple, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. Everything in every conversation is more about navigating gray than it is navigating black or white.
Let's look at some of yours now.
Well, speaking of navigating gray, I don't know if there's much gray about this.
It's pretty black and white.
Yeah, it's pretty black and
literally.
white. That is a piece called Monolith that I built. It's at Jeske Sculpture Park in Ferguson, Missouri. So everybody knows Ferguson's infamy. So I got a cop car and stripped it out and then crushed it into a big block the way you would, so the way one would. I actually got this in Memphis. I bought the car in Memphis, the cop car at an auction. So it's not the conversation, the police are hamstrung, the people are hamstrung, people's, idea about like rights and freedoms and liberties and everything. We tend to sort of think about these things as this sort of like singular monolithic thing. And it's really not. It's really an amalgamation of different ideas that are all sort of like crushed together, and trying to sort of fit into this mold is something that I was sort of looking at. Now I'm also consider, seriously like question the idea of authority and who should have authority and who should have power. And for me to be able to sort of express my power by crushing a cop car, it was a big part of the importance of the act of this. And where it's located in Jeske as comment in Ferguson, Missouri as commentary. I don't know if you want to go to anything else. This is a piece that wrens make prey. It comes from was it from Henry VIII, that wrens make prey where eagles fear to tread. I come to it from a was it Minor Threat song, so this sentiment of like, this sort of image of freedom and liberty kind of being shackled down on this sort of venerable pedestal is sort of what I was looking at.
We're both pretty political.
Yeah, I think, we are both kind of like fairly politically motivated in our ideologies.
Oh yeah, this is mine. That's the piece called Facade. So it's again Monopoly House, and it's just a facade of a house, and it's supported on the back by a bunch of cast iron automatic weapons. So yeah.
One of the things to think about for like our collaboration is I really admire Alison's work, and it's not easy to work with somebody who has strong opinions and strong ideas. But it's rewarding to work with somebody who you respect, and that out of that sort of respect, I think we've developed this third person position when we collaborate that's really nice to have. So both of us have our own sort of singular positions. It's really important to me to be singular. Like I like to do everything by myself. I don't want anybody helping me,
on his own work. Yeah.
On my own work, right? I do lots of work for other people. I have no problem being like a finger on somebody else's hand if I have a skill set. But for me, in the work that I make, like I want to manage everything because it's an expression of my singularity. But when we're collaborating, we get this third person voice where I can be me or she can be her individually, but we can also be this other thing at any given moment that we bring together, that I think is probably, maybe it's a question whether or not it's more or less valuable or potent than us individually,
So this one is called "You Can't Run with the Hares and Hunt with the Hounds." And the rabbits each are go up and down like they're running.
It's on a sewing machine frame, so like a little pedal sewing machine. So you can walk up and you can pedal it, and the rabbits will hop up and down on these little sort of geometric faceted landscapes.
Almost every one of the pieces in this body of work, which includes the one with the dog,
and
crows and some other pieces, but almost every one of the pieces in that body of work has something that the viewer can operate other than the dog piece. But we do hope that people will pet the dog
and rub a little spot on it. Yeah. Which is also maybe a little bit of a like subverting the authority of the institution. Like no museum wants you to touch the artwork, right? And then we're artists that say, come up here and turn this crank, and get their gears going, which is a bit of a thumbing of the nose at the sort of the institution to some extent, but it's an expression of our, like creative authority.
Yeah, that wasn't our goal in doing it at the Metals Museum.
No. Maybe just to poke a little bit.
No.
And then so like that body of work all has like physical interaction. The tone deaf stuff is all sort of has
all have sound,
audio sound stuff. And we generally try to do something that is like a challenge to both of us whenever we do some collaborative things. So like figuring out all the technology and getting everything to work and figuring out all the mechanisms and learning how to write code for, doing the audio devices and stuff is we will almost always challenge ourselves to sort of learn how to incorporate something that we don't already know how to do into the process.
We like to swing for the fences with each new opportunity as much as we can.
I mean, I think we're right back at your turkey shoot. And we have just a couple more minutes, and I'm not seeing any questions. I don't know if people are shy or they're just blown away by the scope of your work. It could be both. But one final question I had in mind is how many cast iron skillets do you have, either individually or together, and how often are they used?
Daily.
Daily. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I've got this really nice cast iron spatula that's made from a cast iron skillet.
Yeah.
That a good friend of ours makes up. So I was pretty happy to get this nice flat iron spatula made out of a cut up cast iron skillet. Yeah, we have quite a bit. The casting community has been really important to us. It's a place where we've always felt welcomed. We've always felt sort of respected and brought into the fold. And to sort of piggyback off of what we were talking about with the Metals Museum, and all these people that come together and do really hard work and work together, they give freely of themselves to others. That's what the Metals Museum does. It gives freely of itself, and it provides opportunity. The groups that we've become affiliated with, and the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance, and been Sloss Furnaces, and all of those are places where we've learned a lot and continue to learn a lot from. And we're really fortunate to be part of those communities. And that's one of the things we always tell our students is, like, finding your people and finding people that will sort of support you and that you can support and that you can get involved with so that you can contribute. And, is really an important thing. One of the founders of the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance is David Lobdell, and one of his statements that he makes a lot is like, make a contribution. Yeah. So anything you can do to sort of express yourself and to make a contribution is a worthwhile endeavor. So we're really fortunate to be to have surrounded ourselves with people that do this and share this belief, and places where there are opportunities to do that.
We have thank you. We have one last question, and this will be it, I promise. Is there anything that you're working on right now that you're really excited about?
Well, collaboratively.
Well, got the big fish.
Well, we've got a project in the works that we're cooking on. We're making a catfish that's cast and has a mechanism. It's like we're making a small version. It's like a 36-inch catfish that you come and turn a crank and it sort of swims. It's articulated, but we're doing that in anticipation of a large commission and like a 20-foot long catfish for this museum.
That'll
swim in the space. So we're pretty excited about that. I'm working on a project with my students right now. Well, the semester's over, but we're doing
their part's
kind of done, but I'm doing a putt-putt golf course for a museum, which is kind of fun. And individually, Allison's working on a couple of nice commissions right now. So for some small scale stuff that she's pretty excited about. There's almost always like half a dozen different projects that are at various degrees of development. Yeah, the big one we're excited about is probably the big fish.
Well, I can't wait to see video of it swimming around. So please share that on your Instagram accounts when it's ready.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'll leave it there with the big fish. Maybe it's a metaphor, maybe not. Thank you both so much for sharing your time and your perspectives with us. Like I said, I've shared their Instagram accounts on the meeting chat, and you can learn more about their perspectives as individual artists through their interviews with Laura Mellon Vermillier on Podcast Iron. And I just cannot thank you enough for being a part of this and for having this conversation. So thank you again. And thanks for those who attended today. And there'll be more in the future. I would encourage you to check out the Branching Out website on the Metal Museum website. And I think there are 4 more coming up, artist conversations. The next one is between Brian Massey, who teaches at University of Central Arkansas, and Desmond Lewis, who teaches at Yale and is also on the Metal Museum board. So I hope that y'all can catch that one. And thank you, Noah and Alison, for starting this off. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.